So today we're going to be looking at Manic Panic in the color Vampire Red. So I do have my swatches labeled 1 through 12, but that is not synonymous with hair levels. Later in the video, we'll be doing like comparisons and then some close-ups. So the numbers are just to help keep track of each swatch as we go. Number 1 is dark blue. I was kind of curious to see if it would turn purple. I got a request to do a green swatch when I did this dye, so number 2 is green. Number 3 is a natural red. 4 is black, and then from 4 to 11, we have a range that goes to platinum blonde. And then number 12 is like the toned version of number 11. So to start, I'll be taking the dye directly out of the container, and I'll be putting it at the top of each swatch. Some people do like to dilute their dyes, so I will be putting the diluted version at the bottom of each swatch. Quickly, I do just want to say, everyone's hair is different, so everyone's hair will take dye differently. It's always important to do as much research as possible when dyeing your hair, and doing things like strand tests are always a good idea. And I do think it's important to note that the number 4 black swatch is the only one that is virgin hair. For the diluted section, we're going to be doing a 8:1 ratio. So that is 8 parts of diluter with 1 part dye. I do get a lot of people asking, so I just want to say I always just use a plain white conditioner when I'm diluting. And if you don't know what diluter is, the short answer is that it just lightens the color of the dye. So I'm going to let these sit for about 3 hours. I will rinse them out, and when they're dry, I will meet you back here. So as usual, number 4 was our black swatch, and that swatch did not take any dye, but every other swatch has taken the dye, even number 5. Number 5 still looks kind of brown in unnatural lighting. There is a little bit of warmth to it, but I'm assuming out in the sun, it probably has a bit more of a burgundy look. Number 1 was the blue swatch before. So that one on the direct dye portion looks pretty much black, and we'll have to see out in the sun if it does much. But the end with the diluted vampire surprisingly actually did turn purple, and it's kind of like has a slight burgundy-ish tone to it, but it's still pretty purple. Number 2 was the green swatch beforehand, and if you're not super familiar with, I don't know if it's color theory, but red and green are across from each other on the color wheel. So if they're at the right shade, they can cancel each other out and neutralize each other, essentially. Number 2 alone is proof that this dye is very pigmented because the red completely covered the green. I would say number 2 does look a little bit more muted and not quite as maybe bright as like number 10, but it's still definitely like a red color. Cool thing about this dye too is that I would say maybe from number 8 to 12 looks relatively good in my opinion. Usually dyes are meant to be dyed on platinum blonde hair, so usually number 11 looks the best, but the red looks pretty intense and saturated on all of these, and then number 7, 6, and 5, I still think it looks really good. It's just not quite as light, obviously, as the blonde swatches were. And even on the diluted section for 6 and 7, you can see a difference. So I was looking for swatches to compare with these, and I realized I haven't done a lot of reds like this. Most of the reds I've done have been orangey reds, so I don't have a lot of comparisons to do today. My first comparison I wanted to do was Lunar Tides in the color Cran Baby. This is comparable to number 12, number 11, number 10, and number 9. So Cran Baby is also pretty pigmented dye. On my swatches it did dye the 6, 7, and 8 as well, but since the undertone is different, I figured just showing the lighter swatches would be more helpful. So Cran Baby looks to be a little bit darker and also a little bit more cool toned. You can especially tell that it's cool toned when it's diluted. It has a little bit more of like a pinky purple look versus Vampire Red looks like a very true red. I would basically say that Cran Baby looks like a burgundy and Vampire Red looks to be closer to like a blood red, which makes sense considering it's called Vampire Red. So the other comparison I wanted to do was Arctic Fox in the color Wrath. This is comparable to number 12, number 11, number 10, number 9, and number 2. I hope the differences are picking up on camera, but this is a lot closer in color than the Cran Baby is. So Wrath doesn't run quite as dark, it's just a little bit lighter. So I'm gonna compare that to the more diluted section for the Vampire. So from my angle, the Wrath does look a hair more pink, but I think in person it's not super noticeable. Like I feel like number 11, for both of them, they look pretty close. And then number 10 and 9 is where I can see the pink coming through a little bit more. I think Vampire Red is just a hair more of like a true red, so it has a little bit more warmth to it, but only a little bit. I think you can actually tell the difference more with the green swatches, so the 2 and the 1. Even on the direct dye portion for Wrath, it ultimately has a little bit more of like a berry tone to the dye. And I think you might be able to see a little bit better in the diluted section. This one looks a little bit closer to a red, and this one is a little bit more cool toned, a little bit more berry looking. But they're both pretty pigmented. I guess it just depends on the fading. I assume Wrath would fade to be a little bit more pink looking. But don't quote me on that, because I've never actually dyed my hair red, so I don't fully know. It's just a theory. A game theory. No, I'm just kidding. So now that we've done our comparisons, I'd like to get into some close-ups. And I do just want to mention, these will be filmed in natural lighting, as well as anything that comes after, which includes any photos you see at the end. I hope this video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do dyes that do not test on animals. Thank you so much to my patrons, and thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.